Error. Response ended prematurely. 14 May 1945. Munich, Schellingstrasse. In a school notebook torn from a burned-out classroom, Karl Meissner writes a line he will never speak aloud. "We will rebuild on half-truths, because full truth would starve us." 2 sentences, and then the world that made them. He is 26. He had trained as a bookkeeper. He had been drafted and sent to a desk in a requisitions office, then knocked back to Munich by a splintering state and a command economy that could not feed its soldiers or its secrets. He survived the last months hiding among the ruins of Schwabing. He drinks boiled water and feels the grit collect under his tongue. He is alive. He is ashamed. He does not know what to call either. The city around him is a geometry of absence, facades without rooms, staircases to the sky. The chimneys stand like blackened metronomes. The Luftschutzkeller signs point to rooms which are now pits. The women are everywhere. Older women with bandages like headscarves, younger women with scarves like bandages. They bend, lift, toss. Trümmerfrauen. The German of record, the German of propaganda, said they were heroes. The German of whispers said they were tired. The mathematics of rubble is simple and merciless. In Berlin, Bundesarchiv records later count more than 75 million cubic meters of rubble. In Munich, the city office's 1946 report lists approximately 40% of apartments uninhabitable and calculates removal at a rate requiring many years with current manpower. The arithmetic of Hans is worse. The men are not here. They are in graves or camps or not yet demobilized. The women work with pry bars and handcarts and buckets, paid in extra ration cards or the quiet permission to take a brick or two home for stoves. On 30 April 1945, the Americans enter Munich, networks folded into a neat grid of command. Non-fraternization orders are posted. Curfews are announced. In the first weeks, an OM Gus occupation report for the Munich military government notes population fearful, compliant, disposed to obey orders and submit to regulations, and also notes severe shortages of food, fuel, and transportation. The old orders dissolve. The new orders arrive typewritten with seals. The first directive, JCS 1067, is not designed to rebuild. It instructs the American authorities to keep Germany, as far as practicable, at the level of a subsistence economy. It is a policy built in the wreckage of a war that killed tens of millions. It has its own morality of hunger. Karl moves through this world by counting. He measures distance in boots worn thin. He measures safety by the hours the curfew leaves unlit. He measures hope by the weight of bread. The ration cards tell a story in rectangles and stamped spaces. Many people live on 1,000 to 1,500 calories a day in the summer of 1945. Heavy workers receive more. Children receive less than they should. The food keeps people alive. It does not feed the nerves that shake in their beds at night. He writes another line he will not say aloud. The biggest thing we carry is a silence we did not choose and now choose every day. The immediate weeks are about bodies, missing, found, claimed, unclaimed. The Munich City Registry, in a 1946 memorandum filed in the Stadtarchiv, estimates over 10,000 missing persons remaining unaccounted for in the municipality. Notices paper walls. Suche, vermisst Zeit. The arithmetic of absence is personal. Mothers lined at the barracks. Wives asking at the transport office. Children trailing in shoes cut open at the toe. Some of the missing return from camps in Allied hands. Some come back from the Soviet Union years later, faces shaped by another winter. Many do not return at all. The missing remain both a fact and an excuse. The occupation hardens into a routine. The curfews are enforced. permits are required. The Americans issue cigarettes as part of rations for their soldiers. Cigarettes become numbers. 4 lucky strikes for a kilo of butter in September 1945, 5 in October. An Allied intelligence summary the following spring gives the exchange rates like a ledger. Cigarette currency currently standard in all major urban markets. Coffee as stable exchange unit where available. RM. Reichsmark at discounted value among civilians, barter preferred. The mathematics of hunger shapes the mind. Potatoes, turnips, dried peas. The hunger winter of 1946–47 strikes the country when poor harvests meet frozen trains. The ports are only just reopening. Coal is scarce. An American report out of Bremen notes ships waiting in harbor, unloading slowed by cold. In February 1947, the rivers freeze. The British Control Commission reports catastrophic coal shortage and prolonged power outages. In Munich, churches open as daytime warming centers. Women with chilblains wrap their hands and keep working in ruins that have frozen themselves into sculptures. When spring arrives, it feels like reprieve, not renewal. In August 1945, before the leaves fall, forms arrive. The Fragebogen, the denazification questionnaire. The mathematics of guilt begins in boxes checked in blue ink. Name, date of birth, place of birth, occupation, party membership, organizations. The form in the American zone runs to 31 questions. The Sprüchkammern, special tribunals, are established to sort a nation by its past. They have categories, 5 of them: Hauptschuldig, major offenders, Belastet offenders, Minder Belastet, offenders, Mitläufer followers, followers, Entlastet, exonerated. The labels are administrative. They carry punishments and permissions. They dictate professions. They assign shame by code. Karl has a file. Later, after he is dead, an archivist will open it in a room with soft light and a rule against pens. It is in a brown folder with a metal fastener. It contains his Antrag application, his Fragebogen, and 3 letters. One of the letters is from a neighbor, a widow whose husband was taken by the Gestapo in 1944 for listening to the BBC. The letter calls Karl an honest man who never hurt anyone. This kind of letter has a name: Herschelschein. A whitewashing certificate. The whitewashing certificate. The word enters German the way cigarette currency entered it, quietly, by need. A Sprüchkammer hearing is recorded with German neatness. Ich war nie politisch aktiv. I joined because it was required from my office. I did my duty. I signed because not signing would have meant losing our ration card. Each line is both a defense and an indictment. The mathematics of guilt becomes a set of weights shifted from one life to another. A man of command, a Kreisleiter, receives a Category 2 and, in some cases, prison. A schoolteacher receives Category 4, is barred from teaching for a season, and returns to class when replacements cannot be found. The OMG US office, in a 1947 report, states, "The denazification process has become increasingly attenuated in its punitive capacity as the need for skilled administrators and technicians intensifies." Statistics do not console, but they describe the way decisions harden into policy. In the American zone, by 1949, approximately 3.6 million cases have been processed. The majority are categorized as Mitläufer or Entlastete. A small percentage, less than 10%, are placed in the categories that carry prison sentences or permanent bans. The Sprüchkammer records include lines like "Wegen Mangels und Beweisen entlastet," exonerated for lack of evidence, and also include lines like "Konnte nicht nachweisen," sich gegen NS gesperrt zu haben, could not demonstrate resistance to the regime. The mathematics of guilt folds into the arithmetic of stability. The new Germany will operate with old hands. Many of those hands wear new rings, new wedding bands, to mark a new beginning. The old ones are hidden in drawers behind ration cards. The displaced arrive like weather. They do not choose their moment. They are brought in cattle cars and columns. Germans from East Prussia, Silesia, Pomerania, the Sudetenland, expulsions that are both organized and chaotic. Trains, foot treks, carts with rope and blankets and religious icons tied to the corners. Mothers carrying babies wrapped in coats. Men too old or too young to have been drafted, shepherding goats into a new life because a goat eats less than a cow and gives milk anyway. The mathematics of displacement is staggering. 12 to 14 million ethnic Germans are forced westward from 1945 to 1950. It is one of the largest forced migrations in European history. The arithmetic of rooms considers a town like Fürstenfeldbruck or a city like Munich, already broken, already short of housing and jobs. The Vertriebenen arrive with papers issued in Czechoslovakia or Poland, stamped ab transportier. They arrive with nothing. The locals are not generous. There are exceptions. There are also slurs. Schlesier, Ostpack. They are Germans and not Germans. The files record this with committees and minutes. The files record this with committees and minutes. The Wohnungsamt Housing Office minutes from October 1946 put it bluntly, Zwangseinquartierung, unavoidable given current shortage. Policemen to accompany placements where resistance suspected. Priority to families. The arithmetic has no wiggle room. 3 rooms become 4 families. Beds are timed. Kitchens are scheduled. Carl finds work at the housing office in November 1946. He took it because it was a job. He stays because it fits his way of thinking. Columns, lists, numbers in a city that thinks with numbers because it cannot afford to think with anything else. He writes names into grids. He marks former Nazis with pencil annotations that will mean doors close or open. He sits across from a Silesian woman in a headscarf and writes 2 children in the margin to make sure she gets the bigger room. He sits across from a man in a suit with an immaculately informal demeanor, and he writes Mitläufer because without that notation the man will sit outside the office until dusk and return the next morning with a colleague's business card. The arithmetic of rooms is a ledger. It is also a measure of power. He senses this and hates it and exercises it anyway. The occupation policy begins to change. JCS 2067 bows out. JCS 2079 replaces it. The Marshall Plan is spoken first like a rumor and then like a promise. American aid will arrive. It will be coordinated through ERP, European Recovery Program offices, with forms that require stamps and signatures. Crates arrive at the Munich Ostbahnhof with ERP, stenciled in black. Oil for factories, milk powder for children, penicillin. The chocolate that will become a story that replaces other stories because it is simpler. The chocolate falls from the air in Berlin when the city is blockaded by the Soviets in 1948-49. The Luftbrücke is a miracle of tonnage. The mathematics of it is clean and patriotic. Planes every few minutes, landing and taking off, bringing coal, food, hope. A British staff report at the time breaks it down. Average 5,000 tons, day, peaks above 8,000, tonnages needed for minimum survival calculated at 4,005. The arithmetic of survival is visible in the sky, unlike the arithmetic of guilt, which is visible in the morning mirror and the grey at the temples. The DP camps exist at the edges of towns and at the edges of towns. Jews liberated from camps, forced laborers from Ukraine, Poland, France, the Netherlands, stateless people whose countries no longer exist, former POWs awaiting repatriation. They live in barracks and requisitioned complexes. They live in a camp in Fürstenwald near Munich. They live in Landsberg am Lech, where a facility that once held prisoners now holds the displaced. Allied reports describe them as independent communities with their own leadership structures, and note that tension with local German populations persists over issues of market interaction and perceived privileges. The DP camps create economies. They create markets. They create memories that conflict. A woman's diary held in the YIVO archives speaks of selling bread to a German woman who cries while paying with a ring. An American intelligence summary notes, German complaints of DPs received better rations, followed by a line about the DP camp mortality rate that makes those complaints feel small. There are moments of contact that cannot be managed with forms. In April and May 1945, Allied units force local Germans to walk through liberated camps. A 1945 photo shows a line of Munich residents standing in their best coats at the entrance to Dachau. The men hold hats pulled low. The women clutch handbags. The smells force themselves into memory as an invading army. The screening of atrocity films is recorded in Information Control Division papers. The notes say things like, audiences stunned into silence, some expressions of disbelief, others crying. A 1946 OM-GES opinion survey asks Germans whether they believe reports of mass killings. A significant portion say no. The mathematics of knowledge is not linear. It is constructed in pieces, brittle and selective. It collides with other mathematics, the fear of starvation, the fear of the Soviets, the need to normalize. Karl reads a newspaper in 1946 that mentions Nuremberg and turns the page. He tells himself he does not have the authority to know. It is a sentence he constructs the way one constructs a ration card, carefully, for use. Denazification files carry the language of the rational and the evasive. The Spuchkammer transcript for a former police official notes, he insisted he was following orders and stated he lacked knowledge of deportations. The court's comment is half administrative, half biblical. Die Mitverantwortung ist aus den Funktionen zu entnehmen. Shared responsibility is to be inferred from functions. It is a sentence that makes lawyers out of clerks and philosophers out of clerks and philosophers out of typists, because the morality of a regime is diffused through memoranda and circulars. The men who wrote those memoranda returned to desk chairs in 1949 under new titles. The 1951 Law 31 in the Federal Republic allows the reinstatement of former civil servants who had been dismissed in the first purges, but whose skills are now deemed necessary. The arithmetic of state building overtakes the algebra of justice. On 20 June 1948, in the Western zones, the currency reform takes place. Old Reichsmarks become new Deutsche Marks at rates that make fortunes vanish and debts affordable. The black market collapses in a day. Shop windows fill with goods which have been held back, waiting for money that meant something. The visual is so immediate that it becomes cliché. A British official in Hamburg writes, "In 24 hours, a new economy has been conjured from old shelves." The cigarettes keep their place in the pockets of men waiting to trade. They no longer rule the market. Karl lines up to receive his 40 DM per adult. He holds it like a talisman and tries not to remember a different day when he held ration cards on a bench in a requisitions office and stamped them with the confidence of a state that cannot last. The factory sirens begin to sound like mornings again. The Wirtschaftswunder does not come as thunder. It comes as ledgers and shipments. It comes with a Mercedes whose engine is machined by a man who never speaks at work about the photographs in his wallet of himself in a different uniform. It comes with a VW Beetle that makes a certain humming sound on new-built Autobahnen repaired by men who call 1945 die Capitulation. under their breath and die Befreiung in official speeches depending on which speaker, and which die Befreiung in of die. It comes with the Marshall Plan's strings, which are both financial and cultural, exchanges, films, pamphlets, the re-education initiatives whose dryness is matched by their insistence. Karl moves from the housing office to a department called Wiederaufbau und Stadtplanung in 1949, reconstruction and city planning. The line sounds clean. The files are messy. The housing shortage does not end. It shifts. Prefabricated houses go up. The Nothonung becomes an institution. Emergency housing units packed in rows with the kind of efficiency that feels both humane and mechanical. Meetings with construction firms produce binders of schedules. Brick rationing continues. Rebar is measured like flour. The mathematics of rebuilding is both noble and infuriating. He notes every day how the big decisions are made just outside his hearing. There is a man who is his superior, who was a party member and who is now a district planner. There is a woman who denounced a neighbor in 1943 and who now hosts fundraisers for refugees. There is a priest who preached endurance under terror and now preaches reconciliation under occupation. There is a lady who brings sugar to the office at Christmas and whispers, "We weren't like that," to the man who signs her papers. The minute-taker writes the formulaic phrases. It was resolved, further consideration postponed, that lubricate a state between memory and denial. The Cold War enters the office like a draft. It is felt in the instructions from above. It is heard in the radio. It is seen in the newspaper photographs of pilots smiling out of cockpits as they drop sacks of coal onto a city that has replaced divisional numbers with sector names. On 23 May 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany is founded in Bonn. On 7 October, the German Democratic Republic is declared in the Soviet zone. 2 states where there was one. 2 memories where there was one. The anti-fascist narrative of the East leaves little room for personal reflection. The anti-totalitarian narrative of the West makes the old membership category of Mittelhofer palatable when the new membership category of NATO is discussed in committee. The mathematics of alliance is not sentimental. It calculates value with clear lines. Adenauer is elected. He speaks with a calm that seems designed to be hard to headline. The amnesty policies follow. 1949-1951. Categories are softened. Suspensions are lifted. The police resume their rounds with some of the same men wearing new caps. The judiciary fills benches with men whose signatures appear in files from 1938 and from 1952. The irony is documented in court reporters' notebooks. The text is so official that it feels antithetical to feeling, and yet it shapes how people feel about their days. The mathematics of guilt has reached a phase like physics, mass transformed into inertia, movement into stability. School books are written. A booklet for 8th graders in Bavaria in 1953 dedicates 20 pages to Goethe and 5 pages to Hitler. It describes the Nazi period as a dictatorship that brought misfortune upon our nation, and focuses on the disaster for German cities and German families without neglecting the other victims, but with a tone that suggests that the city of Munich is both a victim and a witness. The mathematics of curriculum is practical. Teachers spend more time on declensions than on complicity. Children ask questions at home. Parents answer them with stories of bomb shelters and ration queues. They use the passive voice. It was difficult. There was nothing to be done. We were all afraid. There are parents who tell the truth. There are parents who tell lies. Most tell a story with corners sanded down because it makes the dinner hour tolerable. Public commemoration chooses its nouns with care. Den Opfern von Krieg und Gewalterschaft, chiseled into stone in 1956 for a memorial in a Munich square, puts all those nouns on the same level. victims of war and tyranny. It is a general language fitted to a general mood. The ex-Berlin organizations become part of the political landscape with planks and marches and slogans about Heimat. The Tag der Heimat becomes a date on the municipal calendar. An old woman holds up a faded embroidered cloth with the map of Silesia at a rally, and a civic official makes a speech that quotes Thomas Mann and then assures the crowd that the government will never forget their suffering. The moment feels both powerful and evasive. It is a nature of this time that things are both. Contact with victims continues in smaller ways, and it continues across less documented lines. A man arrives at the office with papers that say he was a forced laborer in Munich in 1944. He is now a truck driver for an American depot. He wants to find the address where he lived in a cellar. Carl looks up the street in old directories and finds that the building is gone. He says, "Nothing remains." The man nods. He says, "Thank you," in careful German. The file is closed with a stamp. There is no place in the paperwork for the sentence that sits at the base of the man's spine as he leaves. The joke that is not a joke is that everyone has a file. The file on Karl contains 2 petitions from 1950, both signed by him. One is for an increase in his housing allowance. The other is for the reinstatement of a colleague under the 131 law. Subliminally, he knows that the second petition is a petition for himself. It is the mathematics a society learns. If we let him back, we let me back. If we keep him out, what does that say about me? The language of this exchange is over-adjudicated. The human emotion it carries is undernamed. The economy rises. The advertisements on the trams show women smiling at laundry detergent that makes whites whiter. The refrigerators arrive. The washing machines arrive. A 1954 company newsletter for a plant in Garching celebrates a new line of engines with a picture of men in white coats and a caption about precision. The workday is a steady thing. It feels like a small redemption. People talk about football. They talk about the weather. They talk less about the war and more about the fact that milk is available without a card. The stores smell of apples again. It is in these details that survival becomes life. At night, there are notebooks. Karl writes lines that he would not publish and will not show to his son until he is old. We learn to hope before we learn to know. We learn to spend, not to account. He writes them with a pen received from an American distribution center in 1949. The pen leaks slightly. The blue runs at the edges, like history. The years arrange themselves into a timeline with landmarks. 1953. An uprising in East Berlin reported as disturbances. In the official press. 1955. The Federal Republic regains sovereignty. 1955. The Bundeswehr is created. Uniforms cut in patterns that pretend to be new. The denazification files are moved to new buildings. The records are not destroyed. They are simply catalogued differently. Keyword: Vergangenheit. Cross-reference. Official language tells history what is safe to remember. The public remembers the Hamburg firestorm, the Dresden night, the refugees on snow, the Berlin children receiving raisins from the sky. It remembers Nuremberg as a foreign stage, with German defendants and foreign judges. It remembers the men hanged as distant figures, men with names, not next-door neighbors. It does not remember, at least not in public, the neighbor who reported the Jewish pharmacist 2 buildings down, or the landlord who copied the keys to the back stairwell to accommodate the block warden's visits. The mathematics of memory is biased toward scalable data. The records collect tragedies into a system that can be footnoted. The families tuck the smaller tragedies into drawers that no archivist will open, and yet glints of light. A teacher in a Munich middle school in 1957 assigns an essay on "What did your parents do in the war?" a boy asks his father. Carl says, "I worked in an office. It is not a lie. It is not the whole truth." The boy turns in a paper that says, "My father was not a soldier. He worked with papers." He says the war is not as interesting as the making of peace. The teacher writes, "Good use of commas." The file in the school district contains no cross-reference to Carl's Spruchkammer hearing. Carl's job changes again as the city grows. The planning department now draws lines on maps where highways will cut through neighborhoods. The rhetoric is rational: traffic, efficiency, future growth. The mathematics of progress is happy to add and subtract people. The families displaced by the new road are offered apartments in new blocks. Their mothers say, "At least there is heat." They do not mention what other block displacements in other years smelled like. Everything is an exchange. The men who had been in the city jail for being classified Category 2 receive early releases in the early 1950s. One applies for reinstatement in a civil service job. He quotes his own wartime efficiency in a letter attached to his application. The committee does not see the irony because the committee is made of men who lived by ironing contradictions into clean shirts every morning. The person who takes the minutes writes, "Decision postponed pending review of case file," and the word review is stretched to include forgetting. At the edges of this, the victims move through. The DP camp at Thurenwald becomes a housing estate. Its history is both memorialized and erased. A woman who survived a ghetto and a labor camp leaves for Haifa in 1949 and writes to a friend in Frankfurt, "I will find normal days there, or I will make them." The letter is kept in a family box, then in a museum. The German archive lists it with a numerical code. The list is the nation's memory. The letter is the world's. 1960 brings the Eichmann capture, a trial in Jerusalem, and a ringing among the coffee cups in West German kitchens that tastes like metal on the tongue. People read magazine articles about a man who embodied the bureaucracy of killing. The dry words used to describe his acts bring back the paper forms and ink stamps they have tried to forget. The Frankfurter Auschwitz trials begin in 1963, folding horror into legal German. Terse descriptions enter newspapers, and readers blanch over their breakfast rolls. The men on trial look like men you would stand next to on a tram. The mathematics of guilt comes back to the surface. It is not only history. It is persons with desk jobs. It is men who talk about train schedules without talking about what the trains carried. By this time, Carl has a stack of notebooks. He revisits a line. "We will rebuild on half-truths because full truth would starve us." He wonders if it was right. He counts. He counts the apartments allocated. He counts the times he has said, "We did not know," when he means, "We did not ask." He counts the way the new order has licensed peace and prosperity for many. He counts the way the new order has licensed silence too. The mathematics spins, but he is a man who has learned to balance a ledger. He does not believe in absolutes. He believes in a city that has grown new rooms. He believes in a child who reads more pages on recent history than he did. He believes in a police force that arrests men for beating up foreign workers instead of turning away. He does not believe this is inevitable. He knows where inevitability leads. He attends a memorial service in 1965 in a church near Sendlinger Tor. The priest speaks of the victims of war and tyranny. The mayor speaks of our collective responsibility. A man in the congregation coughs at the wrong moment, and the cough echoes more sharply than the words. Carl stands in the cool of the stone and thinks of a square where Trummer Frauen shoveled brick. He remembers an autumn when ration cards fluttered like leaves. He remembers a man coming to his office in 1947, asking for a paper to make it possible to live with a stranger in a one-room half-house because both had been expelled from somewhere else. He remembers the American corporal on the street the day after the currency reform, smiling as if the future could be as simple as a bill folded in half. The Bundesarchiv keeps its papers in boxes. The Allied intelligence summaries sit in microfilm reels that spools click-click under a researcher's hand in a reading room several decades later. The denazification files fill shelves. The occupation reports move under their own weight, telling a story that is neither absolution nor condemnation. It is law and numbers and minutes, and the ordinary handwriting of ordinary people whose sentences suggest an angle of light in a room. I did not denounce anyone. I was at home with my children. I kept the books. I did not write the laws. These are the voices of people like Carl. And also, beyond them, the voices of those who lived in fear in a room with a back stairwell, and their names are not in these municipal files because someone else burned those records long ago. Empty space is a document too. He is not exceptional. That is his confession and his argument. He writes it in a notebook in 1966 after a news article about a man who has been appointed to a judgeship in Rhineland and whose wartime writings in a journal for law and the new order have come to light. The article is indignant. He is tired of shock. He wants a ledger that stretches across years, one that includes the cost of the barrels of oil that arrive in 1949, the cost of the roofs repaired in 1952, the cost of the names not spoken in kitchen conversations for 2 decades. The mathematics of silence should be set next to the mathematics of survival. He knows it cannot be done in a neat column. He feels it can only be done by people who carry both in their bodies. The cold archival voice and the warm breath of an old man writing combine when he writes, "I was a follower, and following is a verb." It is a line that would have been dangerous in 1945 and carries a different danger now, the danger of not being able to walk past the mirror without stopping. He is not proud and not destroyed. He is in love with the city. He is grateful for the pension that will let him sit in a park in Schwabing and feed birds. He knows who made that possible and who did not live to see it. He can name some of them. The names he cannot name are a weight in his palm. If there is a hero in this, it is a system that moved away from what it had been and towards something else, and it is the people who made those movements possible and then lived in the world they made without ceremonial names. The Trümmerfrauen, the clerks, the teachers, the quiet men who signed for coal deliveries and did not steal. The quiet men who, in a different time, signed orders for a different thing. Systems are visible in the way they handle shortages. They are visible in the way they handle guilt. They are visible in the way they write forms for refugees and then for guests. Gastarbeiter, who will come in later decades to fill the factories and the restaurants, and whose presence will create a new arithmetic of belonging. He writes in his notebook a formula that will not be taught in any school: survival plus fear times denial equals a country running on time. He knows it is crude. He knows that equations do not capture grief. He knows they are all he has. In the final pages, he copies, in thin, precise letters, the opening line, "We will rebuild on half-truths, because full truth would starve us." He draws a single line beneath it and adds another. The war after the war is to learn how to speak without starving. He looks back at the form he filled out in 1946. He imagines a Spruchkammer that no longer exists. He imagines the DP camp near Wolfratshausen, long since removed for apartments and playgrounds, where a woman once sewed a dress from a parachute and a girl ran in a yard, and both left for a country by the sea. He imagines a small boy in 1954 who believed his father when he said he had been a clerk and not a soldier because the sentence felt like safety. He imagines his own body as a file not yet closed, a ledger with entries written with more care now than he was able to give when he wrote ration numbers next to names in 1947. 8 May 1968. Munich has sirens again, but they belong to ambulances and to the new structure of a city full of cars. A student rally passes down Ludwigstraße. The shouts are different now. The faces are young and angry in a way he recognizes from other years, and also in a way that is new. He thinks of his notebooks at home, of a drawer that holds the question of a nation and the answer of a man who did not know how to speak at the right time and learned slowly, after with the help of files and forms and small human acts. He makes a note. The front line is here. He does not point to a map. He does not point to a border. He points inward to his private arithmetic and the public ledgers he kept. He knows now what he knew then and could not say. He knows that a man can be loyal to a city and still betray a person, that he can repair a roof and still avoid a truth, that he can show up at work every day and keep a country alive while keeping a part of himself asleep. The mathematics of guilt, the arithmetic of rooms, of jobs, of cigarettes. He writes the last line he will write on the subject, and it repeats the first, translated for the life he has already lived. Behind every rebuilt street lies a silence and a decision. And in the end, he knows that, for him, the front line after 1945 ran through his memory and his paperwork, not across a battlefield,